I'll kill you. You think you can lock me up forever. When I get out, I'll find you and I'll shoot you just like I shot her." 18-year-old Devin Carter exploded from his seat at the defense table in a California courtroom on a June afternoon in 2022, screaming death threats at Judge Patricia Coleman as she prepared to sentence him to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the murder of his 17-year-old girlfriend, Alicia Martinez. Devon's outburst, which required multiple bailiffs to physically restrain him as he lunged toward the bench while continuing to shout threats, came at the precise moment when the judge was describing how Devon had shot Alicia 3 times in a jealous rage after she tried to end their toxic relationship. Throughout the 6-week trial, Devon had displayed behavior that progressively alarmed courtroom personnel, smirking during testimony about Alicia's final moments, rolling his eyes when her parents described their devastation, whispering what appeared to be jokes to his attorney during victim impact statements, and showing absolutely no remorse for taking the life of a girl who had tried desperately to escape his controlling, abusive behavior. His final explosion of rage and threats against Judge Coleman, captured on courtroom video and witnessed by Alicia's grieving family, would result in additional felony charges and would crystallize for everyone present the continuing danger Devon posed to society. What made this case particularly heartbreaking was not just that Devon Carter had murdered a bright, kind teenage girl whose only mistake was dating him, but that Alicia Martinez had recognized the relationship was dangerous, had taken steps to end it safely, and had died anyway, because Devon believed that if he couldn't have her, no one could. A belief system that characterizes many intimate partner homicides, and that Devon continued to embody even as he faced life imprisonment for acting on it. Before we continue with this deeply troubling case, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from as we explore this case of teen dating violence, the murder of a young woman trying to escape an abusive relationship, and a defendant whose courtroom threat demonstrated exactly why he deserved the harshest possible sentence. The city of Riverside, California, population approximately 330,000 hollers, sits in Southern California's Inland Empire, about 60 miles east of Los Angeles. A diverse community with a mix of residential neighborhoods, the University of California Riverside campus, and commercial districts. Riverside represented a typical mid-sized California city, where families of various socioeconomic backgrounds lived alongside each other. The city's demographics reflected California's diversity, with significant Latino, Asian, Black, and white populations, creating a multicultural environment. The local economy centered on education, healthcare, and service industries, with many residents commuting to Los Angeles or Orange County for work. It was a place where high schools had active social scenes, where teenagers navigated the complexities of dating and relationships, and where teen dating violence was more common than many parents realized, often hidden behind closed doors until tragedy forced it into public view. The Martinez family had lived in Riverside for 2 generations, with Alicia's grandparents having immigrated from Mexico in the 1970s and established roots in the city's Latino community. Her parents, Carlos and Elena Martinez, had both grown up in Riverside, had married young, and had worked hard to provide a stable, loving home for their 3 children, Alicia, 17, her younger sister Gabriella, 15, and their youngest brother Miguel, 12. Carlos worked as a supervisor at a distribution warehouse, while Elena worked as a medical assistant at a family practice clinic. They represented working-class families who emphasized education, family bonds, and strong values as the foundation for their children's success. Alicia Rose Martinez was 17 years old when Devin Carter shot her to death on the evening of February 14, 2022, Valentine's Day, a date whose bitter irony would not be lost on anyone who knew the couple's history. A junior at Martin Luther King High School in Riverside, Alicia represented the kind of bright, ambitious teenager who seemed destined for success beyond her family's working-class roots. With a 3.8 GPA, involvement in the school's dance team and student council, and dreams of attending college to study social work, Alicia had been building toward a future that would honor her parents' sacrifices, while allowing her to help others facing challenges. Alicia's personality was described consistently by family, friends, and teachers as genuinely warm, empathetic, and possessed of an emotional intelligence unusual for her age. She had a gift for making people feel seen and valued, whether comforting a friend dealing with family problems or befriending new students struggling to fit in. Her school counselor, Mrs. Rebecca Thompson, would later testify that Alicia had been the kind of student who not only excelled academically, but who also looked out for peers who were struggling, who volunteered to tutor classmates, and who seemed genuinely invested in making her school community better. Alicia had this ability to connect with people, Mrs. Thompson testified. Students who felt invisible, who felt like no one cared about them, would open up to Alicia because she had this genuine warmth that made people trust her. She wanted to become a social worker because she understood that some people need help and support to overcome challenges. She saw that need in her community, and she wanted to be part of the solution. Beyond her academic and social accomplishments, Alicia had been a devoted daughter and sister. Her mother, Elena, would describe Alicia as my right hand, the child who helped with younger siblings, who assisted with household tasks without being asked, and who could be counted on to be responsible and caring. Carlos would describe his daughter as someone who made him proud every single day, who worked hard in school, who respected her family's values, and who seemed to understand the sacrifices her parents had made to give their children opportunities. Alicia's relationship with her younger siblings had been particularly close. Gabriella, 15, looked up to her older sister and confided in her about typical teenage challenges. Miguel, 12, adored his big sister who attended his soccer games and helped him with homework. Both would be devastated by Alicia's murder, with psychological impacts that would affect them for years. In the year before her death, Alicia had been navigating the typical challenges of junior year SAT preparation, maintaining her grades, college planning, while also dealing with a relationship that had become increasingly controlling and frightening. Her relationship with Devin Carter had started in fall 2020, when both were sophomores, and had initially seemed like a typical high school romance. However, evidence would emerge showing that what began as normal teenage dating had quickly evolved into a pattern of control, jealousy, and abuse that would ultimately cost Alicia her life. Alicia's journal, discovered after her death and submitted as evidence during trial, provided heartbreaking documentation of how she had recognized the relationship was unhealthy and had struggled to find a way to end it safely. An entry from November 2021, 3 months before her murder, read, "Devin got really angry today when he saw me talking to Marcus after English class. Marcus and I were just discussing the homework assignment, but Devin accused me of flirting. He grabbed my arm really hard and told me I shouldn't talk to other guys. It left a bruise. I tried to tell him he was overreacting, but he said if I really loved him, I wouldn't give him reasons to be jealous. I'm starting to feel scared of him, but I don't know how to break up without making him more angry." Another entry from January 2022, just 1 month before Alicia's death, showed her fear intensifying. "Devin has been texting me constantly, like every few minutes, wanting to know where I am and who I'm with. If I don't respond immediately, he gets furious. He showed up at my house last night without calling first, and got angry that I wasn't home. I was at dance practice like I told him I would be, but he said I should have reminded him. My parents are starting to notice that something is wrong. Mom asked me if everything was okay with Devin, and I didn't know what to say. I want to break up with him, but I'm genuinely scared of what he'll do. He's told me multiple times that if I ever leave him, he'll make sure I regret it. I need to figure out how to end this safely." These entries, read aloud during trial by the prosecutor, would provide devastating evidence that Alicia had known she was in danger, had wanted to leave the relationship, and had been actively trying to figure out how to escape safely when Devin killed her. The failure of support systems to provide Alicia with the help she needed to leave safely the normalization of controlling boyfriend behavior. The lack of accessible resources for teens in abusive relationships. The tendency to dismiss teen dating violence as drama became a secondary tragedy that compounded the primary tragedy of Alicia's murder. In the final weeks before her death, Alicia had confided in several friends about wanting to break up with Devin and about being afraid of his reaction. Her best friend, Jasmine Rodriguez, no relation, would testify that Alicia had explicitly stated she was afraid Devin might hurt her if she tried to leave. "Alicia told me she was scared," Jasmine testified. She said Devin had gotten so jealous and controlling that she felt like she couldn't breathe. She wanted to break up with him, but she was afraid. She asked me what she should do, and I told her to tell her parents or a counselor. I wish I had done more to help her get away from him. Other friends would describe similar conversations, with Alicia expressing fear of Devin's reaction and uncertainty about how to safely end the relationship. Several would report that Alicia had mentioned Devin making threats about what he would do if she left him, though most had assumed these were empty teenage melodrama rather than genuine threats of violence. Most tragically, Alicia had finally decided in early February 2022 to end the relationship despite her fear. She had confided in her mother Elena about Devin's controlling behavior and about her desire to break up. Elena, recognizing her daughter's fear, had helped Alicia develop a safety plan, breaking up with Devin in a public place during school hours, having friends nearby for support, and blocking his number immediately afterward. This plan, while thoughtful, would prove insufficient against Devin's rage and his determination that if he couldn't have Alicia, no one would. Devin Marcus Carter was 18 years old when he murdered Alicia Martinez. He had turned 18 in December 2021, making him legally an adult when he committed the murder and ensuring he would be tried as an adult. As the youngest of 3 sons in a troubled family, Devin had grown up with significant instability and had displayed concerning behavior from early ages that suggested potential for violence. Devin's father had been absent from his life, having left the family when Devin was 5 years old. His mother, Sharon Carter, had struggled with substance abuse issues throughout Devin's childhood and had been inconsistently present as a parent. Devin and his brothers had been raised primarily by their maternal grandmother until her death when Devin was 13, after which they had returned to Sharon's care, despite her ongoing struggles with addiction and instability. School records that became evidence during trial documented troubling behavior throughout Devin's academic career. Teachers noted that he had difficulty controlling his temper, reacted with disproportionate anger to minor frustrations, and showed concerning attitudes toward female students. Multiple incident reports from middle school and high school documented Devin being disciplined for aggressive behavior, inappropriate comments to girls, and conflicts with male students that appeared to center around jealousy or perceived challenges to his status. A psychological evaluation conducted when Devin was 15, after he had been suspended for threatening another student, revealed concerning findings that had been inadequately addressed. The evaluating psychologist had identified features consistent with conduct disorder and narcissistic personality traits, including lack of empathy, sense of entitlement, and intense reactions to perceived rejection or disrespect. Most significantly, the evaluation had noted the student demonstrates concerning attitudes toward relationships and particularly toward female peers. He views females as possessions rather than as individuals with autonomy. He expresses extreme jealousy and possessiveness regarding romantic interests. Without intensive intervention, there is significant risk of escalation to violence in intimate relationships. This evaluation had recommended intensive therapy and possibly medication, but follow-through had been minimal. Sharon, overwhelmed by her own challenges, had not pursued the recommended treatment consistently. Devin had attended a few therapy sessions but had been resistant and had eventually stopped going entirely. By high school, Devin's dysfunction had become more apparent to those who knew him. He had been involved in several physical altercations with male students, typically related to jealousy over girls. He had dated several girls before Alicia, and in each case the relationship had followed a similar pattern. Initial charm and attentiveness that quickly evolved into controlling behavior, jealousy, and eventually aggression that led to the breakup. 2 ex-girlfriends would later testify that Devin had been possessive and controlling, that he had monitored their activities constantly, and that breaking up with him had required blocking him on all platforms and sometimes having parents or school administrators intervene. Most concerning were statements Devin had made to peers about his views on relationships and on female autonomy. One friend, testifying during trial, recalled Devin saying during junior year, "If a girl is mine, she's mine. I don't share and I don't let go. Girls need to understand that once you're with me, you don't get to decide you want someone else. There are consequences for disrespect." Another classmate recalled Devon making threatening statements about an ex-girlfriend who had started dating someone new. She thinks she can just move on, like I didn't matter. She's going to learn that you don't disrespect me without consequences. I'll make sure she regrets thinking she was too good for me. These statements, which multiple witnesses confirmed, demonstrated a pattern of viewing females as property, of believing he had ownership rights over girlfriends, and of threatening consequences for females who exercised autonomy to end relationships. This mindset that women who leave intimate relationships deserve punishment is the core belief system that drives many intimate partner homicides, and Devon embodied it completely. Devon's relationship with Alicia had begun in October 2020, during their sophomore year, when both attended Martin Luther King High School. According to friends of both teens, Devon had pursued Alicia persistently, and she had eventually agreed to date him. The relationship had started normally enough by teenage standards, with typical activities like attending school events together, going to movies, and spending time with mutual friends. However, the controlling behavior had begun early. Friends would later report that within weeks of the relationship starting, Devon had become possessive of Alicia's time, had expressed jealousy when she talked to male friends, and had started making demands about how she dressed and who she spent time with. Alicia, like many people in their first serious relationship, had initially interpreted this behavior as evidence that Devon cared deeply about her, rather than recognizing it as red flags of controlling, abusive personality. By spring 2021, Devon's behavior had escalated. He had insisted on knowing Alicia's location at all times, had demanded access to her phone and social media passwords, and had reacted with anger when she had plans that didn't include him. Multiple friends reported observing, concerning interactions, Devon grabbing Alicia's arm aggressively, Devon yelling at her in school hallways, Devon isolating her from friends who expressed concerns about his behavior. By summer 2021, the relationship had clearly become abusive by any reasonable definition. Alicia had confided in friends that Devon had pushed her during arguments, had damaged her phone when he was angry, and had threatened to hurt himself if she tried to break up with him. She had stopped participating in some activities she loved because Devon didn't want her doing them. She had lost contact with several friends because Devon was jealous of her relationships with them. Most concerning were incidents in fall 2021 where Devon's violence had escalated. Alicia had arrived at school with visible bruises on at least 2 occasions, telling friends that Devon had grabbed her or pushed her during arguments, while no mandatory reporters had been notified, either because Alicia concealed the source of the bruises or because adults who noticed them accepted her explanations. The evidence of physical violence was clear to Alicia's peer group. By January 2022, Alicia had recognized that the relationship was dangerous and had begun planning to end it. She had confided in her mother Elena about Devon's behavior, the jealousy, the control, the occasional physical aggression. Elena, concerned for her daughter's safety, had helped Alicia develop a plan to break up with Devon as safely as possible, doing it at school during the day, having friends nearby, blocking his number immediately, and having school security aware in case Devon tried to confront Alicia afterward. On February 11, 2022, Alicia had executed this plan. She had broken up with Devon during lunch period at school in a public area with friends nearby for support. According to witnesses, Devon had initially seemed shocked, then angry. He had tried to convince Alicia to reconsider, had told her she was making a mistake, and had eventually walked away after Alicia firmly told him the relationship was over and that she didn't want to be with him anymore. For the rest of that day and over the weekend, Devon had bombarded Alicia with texts and calls, over 200 messages according to phone records, alternating between begging her to reconsider, threatening to hurt himself if she didn't take him back, and making veiled threats about what would happen if she thought she could just move on from him. Alicia, following the safety plan, had blocked his number and had not responded to any messages. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Devon's rage had crystallized into a plan to ensure that if he couldn't have Alicia, no one would. Evidence recovered from Devon's phone would show searches on the morning of February 14th, including how to win back ex-girlfriend, what happens if you shoot someone, and best place to shoot to kill instantly. These searches demonstrated premeditation and planning rather than impulsive violence. The evening of February 14, 2022, began with Alicia at home with her family, having declined to go out with friends because she wanted to avoid any chance of encountering Devon on a day when she knew he would be particularly emotional about their breakup. According to the timeline reconstructed by investigators, Alicia had been in her bedroom doing homework around 7 p.m. when her younger sister Gabriella had called up to her that someone was at the door asking for her. Alicia, assuming it was a friend, had gone downstairs and had opened the front door to find Devon standing on her porch, holding a bouquet of roses. According to testimony from family members who witnessed what happened next, Devon had immediately launched into a speech about how he loved Alicia, how they belonged together, how he had made mistakes but wanted another chance. Alicia had firmly told him she didn't want to get back together, that he needed to leave, and that she was sorry if he was hurt. But her decision was final. This rejection delivered clearly and finally had triggered the rage that Devon had been nursing since the breakup 3 days earlier. Witnesses would describe seeing Devon's expression change from pleading to furious in an instant. Before anyone could react, Devon had reached into his jacket and had pulled out a handgun, a 9mm pistol that he had stolen from his older brother's apartment several days earlier, specifically in anticipation of this confrontation. Alicia had immediately registered the danger, her expression changing from firm resolve to terror as she saw the gun. She had turned to run back into the house, but Devon had fired 3 shots in rapid succession, striking Alicia twice in the back and once in the head as she fell. The entire shooting had lasted perhaps 5 seconds from the moment Devon pulled the gun until Alicia collapsed on her family's entryway floor. The immediate aftermath was captured partially on a neighbor's security camera and was reconstructed through witness testimony. Elena Martinez, who had been in the kitchen, had heard the gunshots and had run to the entryway to find her daughter bleeding on the floor, and Devon standing on the porch still holding the gun. Elena's screams had brought Carlos and the other children running, creating a scene of absolute horror as the family realized what had happened. Devon had stood on the porch for several seconds after shooting Alicia, apparently shocked by his own actions. A neighbor who had heard the shots and had called 911 would testify that Devon had looked confused, like he couldn't believe what he had just done. However, rather than rendering aid or calling for help, Devon had fled, running to his car parked down the street and driving away from the scene. Alicia had been conscious initially, gasping for air and bleeding extensively from her wounds. Carlos had attempted to apply pressure to the gunshot wounds while Elena called 911, their younger children screaming and crying as they watched their sister dying in front of them. Paramedics had arrived within 6 minutes and had immediately begun emergency treatment, but Alicia's injuries were catastrophic. She had been transported to Riverside University Health System Medical Center, where she had died approximately 40 minutes after being shot, never regaining consciousness after the initial moments following the shooting. The investigation that followed was straightforward in establishing Devon's guilt. He had shot Alicia in front of multiple witnesses, including her family, but would document the full extent of his planning and the pattern of abuse that had preceded the murder. Detective Mark Johnson of the Riverside Police Department, the lead investigator assigned to the case, had immediately identified this as an intimate partner homicide with clear premeditation. The manhunt for Devon Carter lasted approximately 8 hours after the shooting. He had fled the scene in his car and had initially attempted to drive toward Los Angeles, apparently with some vague idea of escaping to Mexico. However, police had quickly identified Devon through witness descriptions and had issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, alert for his vehicle. He has been located at a gas station in Corona, about 15 miles from Riverside, and had been arrested without incident by Corona Police Department officers around 3:00 a.m. on February 15th. Devon's demeanor at the time of arrest was described by officers as detached and emotionless. He had not resisted arrest and had made no statements beyond asking if Alicia was dead. When informed that yes, Alicia had died from her injuries, Devon's response had been reported as okay, with no visible emotional reaction. The interrogation of Devon Carter, conducted later on February 15th with his court-appointed attorney present, would provide a crucial evidence of premeditation and motive. Detective Johnson had approached the interview strategically, recognizing that Devon's narcissistic personality traits meant he might provide incriminating information while attempting to justify his actions. Devon had initially claimed that he hadn't intended to kill Alicia, that he had brought the gun to scare her into taking him back, and that the gun had just gone off when she turned away from him. However, this claim was immediately contradicted by the forensic evidence showing 3 deliberate shots and by witness testimony describing Devon raising the gun and firing purposefully. When confronted with evidence that he had fired 3 times, Devon had adjusted his story. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just so angry that she was rejecting me. I loved her more than anyone, and she just threw me away like I didn't matter. When she turned away from me, I just wanted to make her understand that you can't treat people like they're disposable. I pulled the trigger before I really thought about what I was doing." This statement, describing the shooting as a way to make Alicia understand something, framing her exercising autonomy as treating him like he's disposable, revealed Devon's core belief that Alicia had wronged him by ending their relationship, and that violence was a justified response to her perceived disrespect. When Detective Johnson asked if Devon regretted killing Alicia, his response was chilling. "I regret that it came to this. I wish she had just given me another chance like I asked. If she had just said yes when I showed up with the roses, we would have gotten back together and none of this would have happened. So, yeah, I feel bad about how things turned out, but she made a choice that led to this." This continued blaming of Alicia for her own murder, suggesting that she could have prevented her death by agreeing to resume a relationship with her abuser, demonstrated Devon's complete inability to accept responsibility, and his continued belief that he had been wronged by Alicia's autonomous decision to leave him. The forensic evidence collected from the scene and from Devon's belongings provided additional proof of premeditation. The gun had been stolen from Devon's brother's apartment 2 days before the murder. Devon's phone searches on the morning of February 14th showed him researching violence and effects of gunshot wounds. Text messages Devon had sent to friends in the hours before the shooting included statements like, "If she won't take me back, she's going to regret it," and "Tonight changes everything." Perhaps most damning was a note found in Devon's car after his arrest, apparently written on February 14th before he drove to Alicia's house. The note read, "If Alicia won't come back to me, I'm going to show her what happens when you disrespect someone who loves you. She thinks she can just move on and be happy without me. She's wrong. If I can't have her, no one will. She's mine, and she's going to understand that tonight." This note, introduced as evidence during trial, provided explicit proof of premeditation, of possessive belief that Alicia was Devon's property, and of specific intent to ensure that if she wouldn't be with him, she wouldn't be with anyone, the classic motivation for intimate partner homicide. The decision to charge Devon as an adult for Alicia's murder was straightforward given his age of 18 at the time of the crime. On February 16, 2022, Devon Carter was formally charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances, including murder involving intimate partner violence and use of a firearm, which carried potential sentences ranging from life with possibility of parole after 25 years to life without possibility of parole. He was held without bail, with prosecutors arguing that he posed an ongoing danger and had demonstrated willingness to use lethal violence. The impact on the Martinez family was immediate and catastrophic. Carlos and Elena had lost their eldest daughter in the most violent and traumatic way imaginable, murdered on their doorstep while they stood helpless to protect her. Gabriela and Miguel had witnessed their sister being shot and had watched her die, creating trauma that would require years of therapy to process. The entire family struggled with feelings of guilt, Elena for not doing more to keep Alicia safe, Carlos for not recognizing the danger Devon posed, Gabriela for not somehow preventing what happened. "My daughter died in my arms," Elena would later testify. "She was bleeding and gasping, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save her. She was trying to protect herself by ending a dangerous relationship, and he killed her for it." How do you process that? How do you accept that your child died because she had the courage to say no to someone who was hurting her? The impact extended beyond the immediate family to Alicia's school and community. Martin Luther King High School brought in crisis counselors to help students process the tragedy. Friends who had known Alicia struggled with guilt that they hadn't done more to help her escape the relationship. The Riverside community organized vigils and memorials, with hundreds attending to honor a young woman whose life had been stolen by intimate partner violence. The trial of State of California versus Devin Carter began on April 18, 2022, in Riverside County Superior Court before Judge Patricia Coleman. The case had attracted significant media attention throughout Southern California and had gained national coverage given the Valentine's Day timing, the victim's age, and the broader issue of teen dating violence. The courtroom was filled daily with Alicia's family and supporters, domestic violence advocates, and community members who had been touched by the tragedy. Jury selection proved challenging, with potential jurors expressing difficulty remaining objective about a case where a teenage girl had been shot by her ex-boyfriend on her family's doorstep. Many potential jurors had strong feelings about domestic violence. New people who had experienced intimate partner violence or had daughters Alicia's age, creating understandable difficulty with maintaining objectivity. After 2 weeks of careful examination, a jury of 9 women and 3 men was seated, all of whom had affirmed their ability to evaluate evidence fairly despite the case's emotional difficulty. Lead prosecutor Daniel Rodriguez opened the trial by immediately establishing the context of abuse and Devin's possessive belief system. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about what happens when a young man believes he owns his girlfriend and believes he has the right to kill her rather than accept her decision to leave. Alicia Martinez recognized that her relationship with Devin Carter was abusive. She developed a safety plan to leave him. She broke up with him in a public place during school hours with friends nearby. She blocked his number when he wouldn't stop harassing her. She did everything right, and Devin Carter murdered her for it because he believed that if he couldn't have her, no one should. Rodriguez displayed photographs of Alicia on the courtroom screen smiling with her family, in her dance team uniform, at her quinceañera the previous year, full of life and promise. Alicia Martinez was 17 years old. She had dreams of going to college, of becoming a social worker, of helping people facing challenges. She had a family who loved her and friends who valued her. She had her whole life ahead of her. Devin Carter took all of that away on Valentine's Day because his ego couldn't tolerate being told no. The evidence will show you premeditated murder. Devin planned this, researched it, wrote about his intentions, and executed Alicia when she maintained her right to end their relationship. Defense attorney Michael Torres faced the enormous challenge of defending a client who had shot his girlfriend in front of witnesses. Torres's opening strategy focused on arguing that while Devin had killed Alicia, the appropriate charge was second-degree murder rather than first-degree, claiming the shooting had been impulsive rather than planned despite evidence to the contrary. Members of the jury, you are going to hear about a terrible tragedy. Alicia Martinez is dead, shot by Devin Carter. This is not in dispute. But what you must determine is whether this was a calculated, premeditated murder, or whether this was a young man who, in a moment of extreme emotional distress after being rejected by someone he loved, made a terrible, impulsive decision. The evidence will show that Devin didn't go to Alicia's house planning to kill her. He went hoping to reconcile. When she rejected him, he reacted with violence that he now deeply regrets. This is a tragedy, but it's not the cold-blooded, premeditated murder the prosecution alleges. This defense strategy, conceding the killing while arguing about degree of murder, was Torres's only viable approach given the overwhelming evidence. However, prosecutors would effectively demonstrate that Devon's planning, his possessive statements, and his note explicitly stating intent to harm Alicia all proved premeditation. The prosecution's case unfolded over 4 weeks, with witnesses and evidence creating a comprehensive portrait of abuse, escalation, and calculated murder. The testimony began with Alicia's family and friends describing her character, the controlling nature of her relationship with Devon, and her fear as she tried to leave. Elena Martinez provided heartbreaking testimony about helping her daughter plan to safely break up with Devon and about the moment she found Alicia shot on their doorstep. Alicia came to me in early February and told me she was scared of Devon. Elena testified through tears. She said he was jealous and controlling, that he had grabbed her and pushed her, that he had threatened what would happen if she tried to leave. We talked about how to break up with him safely. We thought if she did it at school during the day with friends nearby, that would keep her safe. We were wrong. He killed her anyway. Gabriela Martinez, now 16 years old and still clearly traumatized by what she had witnessed, testified about seeing Devon shoot her sister. I heard loud bangs, and I ran to see what happened, Gabriela said, crying throughout her testimony. Alicia was on the floor bleeding, and Devon was just standing there holding the gun. My mom was screaming. My sister was dying right in front of us, and there was nothing we could do. I have nightmares about it every night. I see my sister getting shot over and over. Devon took my big sister away from me and destroyed my family. Friends of Alicia testified about the progression of Devon's controlling behavior and about Alicia's growing fear. Jasmine Rodriguez described conversations where Alicia had expressed fear for her safety and had asked for advice about how to leave the relationship. Alicia knew Devon was dangerous, Jasmine testified. She told me he had said that if she ever left him, he would make sure she regretted it. She was trying to figure out how to break up with him without getting hurt. She did everything right. She broke up with him in public. She had friends nearby. She blocked his number. And he still killed her. Other friends described Devon's behavior during the relationship showing up uninvited to monitor Alicia's activities, expressing extreme jealousy over innocent interactions, making possessive statements about Alicia being his, and becoming increasingly controlling over time. This testimony established the pattern of abuse that had characterized the relationship, and that had ultimately led to murder when Alicia exercised her right to leave. The most dramatic testimony came from witnesses who had been present at the shooting. A neighbor who had been outside when Devon arrived testified about hearing Devon's voice raised as he spoke to someone at the Martinez house, hearing what sounded like an argument, and then hearing 3 gunshots in rapid succession. The neighbor had immediately called 911 and had seen Devon fleeing toward his car. The forensic evidence presentation provided clinical but powerful testimony about Alicia's injuries and death. Dr. Patricia Chen, the medical examiner who performed Alicia's autopsy, testified that Alicia had been shot 3 times, twice in the back and once in the head, and that all 3 wounds would have been rapidly fatal even with immediate medical intervention. The trajectories of the bullets, all entering from behind as Alicia attempted to flee into her house, demonstrated that she had posed no threat to Devon when shot. The pattern of injuries shows that Alicia Martinez was attempting to escape when she was shot, Dr. Chen explained. She was struck twice in the back as she turned away from the shooter, and once in the head as she fell. These are not defensive wounds. These are execution wounds. She was murdered while fleeing from her attacker. The testimony about Devon's phone records and internet searches provided crucial evidence of premeditation. Digital forensics expert Sarah Martinez walked the jury through Devon's searches on the morning of February 14th. Searches about violence, gunshot wounds, and effects of different caliber weapons. These searches, conducted just hours before Devon drove to Alicia's house with a stolen gun, demonstrated clear planning rather than impulsive action. Perhaps most damaging was the introduction of Devon's note found in his car. The prosecutor read it aloud, allowing the jury to hear Devon's own words expressing possessive beliefs about Alicia and explicit intent to harm her if she wouldn't resume their relationship. "If I can't have her, no one will." These words, written by Devon before the murder, provided direct proof of premeditation and of the possessive mindset that drives intimate partner homicide. The prosecution's final significant evidence came from Devon's own statements to police. The recorded interrogation was played for the jury, allowing them to hear Devon continue to blame Alicia for her own death, express anger that she had rejected him, and show no genuine remorse beyond regret that he had been caught. His statement that she made a choice that led to this demonstrated his continued belief that Alicia bore responsibility for getting murdered because she exercised autonomy to end their relationship. Throughout the prosecution's case, Devon's behavior in the courtroom became increasingly concerning. Rather than showing appropriate seriousness or remorse, he displayed arrogance and indifference. He had been observed rolling his eyes during Alicia's friend's testimony, appearing to suppress smirks when her mother cried on the stand, and whispering what seemed to be dismissive comments to his attorney during victim impact statements. His body language suggested he believed the jury would somehow sympathize with him or understand his reasons for killing Alicia. The defense's case, presented over 1 week, focused primarily on attempting to paint Devon as a troubled young man who had reacted impulsively in a moment of emotional crisis rather than as someone who had planned murder. The defense called a psychologist who testified that Devon had experienced childhood trauma related to his absent father and his mother's substance abuse, that he had attachment issues that made rejection particularly difficult for him, and that his capacity for impulse control was impaired. However, this expert testimony was effectively challenged on cross-examination, when Prosecutor Rodriguez established that trauma and attachment issues don't typically lead to murder, that millions of people experience difficult childhoods without becoming killers, and that Devon's planning behavior, stealing the gun days in advance, conducting research, writing a note expressing intent, was inconsistent with purely impulsive action. The defense also attempted to present evidence suggesting that Alicia had provoked the shooting by rejecting Devon on Valentine's Day, a particularly emotional date. This victim-blaming strategy was not only ethically problematic, but also largely unsuccessful with the jury, who could see it as an attempt to justify the unjustifiable, and to shift blame to a murder victim for exercising her right to end a relationship. Most significantly, the defense did not call Devin to testify, recognizing that his personality and his continued inability to accept responsibility would destroy his case. The jury heard from Devin only through his recorded statements to police, which provided more than sufficient evidence of his guilt and his lack of genuine remorse. The closing arguments began on May 26, 2022. Prosecutor Rodriguez delivered a powerful synthesis of the evidence and an emotional appeal for justice for Alicia. Ladies and gentlemen, you have seen overwhelming evidence that Devin Carter murdered Alicia Martinez in cold blood. He couldn't accept her decision to end their abusive relationship, so he stole a gun, drove to her house, and shot her 3 times while she tried to flee to safety. This was not impulsive. This was planned. Devin researched violence that morning. He wrote a note expressing his intent to harm Alicia if she wouldn't take him back. He brought a loaded gun to her home, and when she maintained her right to say no to him, he executed her. Rodriguez displayed the photographs of Alicia one final time alive, smiling, full of potential. Alicia Martinez recognized she was in a dangerous relationship and tried to leave safely. She did everything right. She broke up in public. She blocked his number. She had her family nearby. And Devin Carter killed her anyway, because he believed he owned her and had the right to take her life rather than accept her autonomy. This is first-degree murder. This is intimate partner homicide. And Devin Carter deserves to be convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances. Defense attorney Torres made a final appeal for the jury to find Devin guilty of a lesser charge. What Devin did was terrible. Alicia Martinez is dead, and Devin caused her death. He should be held accountable. But this was not a calculated execution. This was a young man who, in a moment of emotional crisis, made an irreversible, terrible decision. Second-degree murder is the appropriate charge that reflects what actually happened. The jury began deliberations on May 27, 2022, at 10 a.m. They deliberated for approximately 7 hours before reaching a verdict, returning to the courtroom at 5:15 p.m. The relatively quick deliberations suggested the evidence of first-degree murder had been compelling, despite the defense's attempts to argue for a lesser charge. Judge Coleman asked the jury foreman if they had reached a verdict. "We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied. "In the matter of State of California versus Devin. Carter, on the charge of first-degree murder with special circumstances in the death of Alicia Martinez, how do you find?" "We find the defendant guilty as charged." Alicia's family embraced, crying with relief that justice had been achieved. Devin showed visible reaction for the first time, his face paling, his confident demeanor cracking as he realized he faced life in prison. His mother, Sharon, sitting in the gallery, cried openly as he processed that her son would likely never be free again. The verdict on the special circumstances findings, intimate partner violence, and use of a firearm meant that Devin faced either life with possibility of parole after 25 years or life without possibility of parole. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for June 20, 2022, providing 3 weeks for preparation of victim impact statements and sentencing recommendations. The 3 weeks between conviction and sentencing gave Devin time to process the reality of his situation, though his behavior suggested he had not yet developed genuine remorse or understanding. Jail staff reported that he spent most of his time alone, showed minimal emotional response to his conviction, and made statements suggesting he still believed he had been treated unfairly. The sentencing hearing on June 20th, 2022, began with victim impact statements that provided the most emotionally powerful moments of the entire case. Elena Martinez spoke about losing her daughter and about the permanent trauma inflicted on her entire family. Alicia was my firstborn, my helper, my friend, Elena testified through constant tears. She came to me for help getting away from Devin safely. I tried to help her develop a plan, but our plan wasn't enough. He killed her anyway. My younger children watched their sister die. My husband and I couldn't protect her. We will carry this trauma and this guilt for the rest of our lives. Carlos Martinez addressed Devin directly, his voice shaking with grief and rage. You murdered my daughter because she wouldn't be your girlfriend anymore. You took away the person who meant everything to me. Alicia had dreams, plans, a future. She was kind and smart and had so much potential. And you killed her because your ego couldn't handle being told no. You are a coward and a murderer, and I hope you spend every day of the rest of your life thinking about what you took from Alicia and from our family. Gabriela Martinez, still visibly traumatized 16 months after witnessing her sister's murder, spoke about the nightmares, the therapy, and the permanent loss. I was supposed to have my big sister for my whole life. She was supposed to be at my graduation, at my wedding, in my life forever. Devin took that away. I have PTSD from watching him shoot her. I can't close my eyes without seeing it. And he doesn't even care. He's shown no remorse at all. He needs to be locked away forever. Throughout these statements, Devin's demeanor remained troublingly inappropriate. He showed minimal, visible emotional response, occasionally appeared to be suppressing eye rolls or sighs, and at one point was observed by multiple witnesses to be yawning during Elena's testimony about finding her daughter bleeding to death. This behavior did not go unnoticed by Judge Coleman or by members of Alicia's family sitting in the gallery. Defense attorney Torres made a final plea for life with possibility of parole rather than life without parole. Your Honor, Devin Carter is 18 years old. He committed a terrible crime and deserves serious punishment. But life without parole means he will die in prison with no chance of redemption. We ask the court to impose life with parole eligibility after 25 years. Recognizing that people can change and that Devin may develop genuine remorse and rehabilitation over decades of incarceration. Prosecutor Rodriguez countered by emphasizing the premeditated nature of the murder, Devin's continued lack of remorse, and the need to protect society. Your Honor, Devin Carter planned and executed the murder of a teenage girl who was trying to escape his abuse. He has shown no genuine remorse. Even during victim impact statements, he has appeared bored and dismissive. He poses a continuing danger, particularly to women. Life without parole is the appropriate sentence. Before pronouncing sentence, Judge Coleman prepared to offer Devin an opportunity to address the court. What happened next would shock everyone present and would result in additional felony charges against Devin. Judge Coleman looked at Devin and said, "Mr. Carter, before I impose sentence, you have the right to address the court. Do you wish to make a statement?" Devin stood, and his attorney appeared to be attempting to stop him or guide him through prepared remarks. But Devon ignored his attorney and began speaking, his tone immediately hostile and defensive rather than remorseful. "Yeah, I want to say something," Devon began. "This whole trial has been completely unfair. Everyone acts like I'm some kind of monster, like I planned to kill Alicia. But nobody wants to talk about how she treated me. She disrespected me. She embarrassed me by breaking up with me at school in front of people. She blocked my number like I was some stalker when I was just trying to talk to her. Mr. Carter, I'm going to stop you right there," Judge Coleman interrupted firmly. "If you're going to address the court, it needs to be appropriate, and it needs to show some recognition of the harm you caused." But Devon, apparently unable to control his rage even in the moment when his sentence was being determined, continued. His voice grew louder and his body language became aggressive. "You want me to show remorse? For what? For loving someone who threw me away? Alicia made her choice and I made mine. If she had just come back to me like I asked, none of this would have happened. This is as much her fault as mine. And now you're going to lock me up forever? That's not justice. That's— Mr. Carter, sit down immediately," Judge Coleman commanded, her voice carrying authority that made clear this was not a request. But Devon was beyond reason. Years of narcissistic entitlement, rage at being held accountable, and complete inability to accept responsibility culminated in an explosion that would become the defining moment of the case. He turned toward Judge Coleman, his face contorted with rage, and began screaming. "I'm not going to sit down. You don't get to tell me what to do. You're going to sentence me to life in prison for killing a girl who disrespected me?" Devon's voice reached a crescendo as he screamed the threat that would result in additional charges. "I'll kill you. You think you can lock me up forever. When I get out, I'll find you and I'll shoot you just like I shot her. I'll shoot you in the fucking head. You're dead. You hear me? You're dead." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Bailiffs immediately rushed toward Devon, who was still screaming threats at the judge while attempting to move toward the bench. It took 4 bailiffs to restrain him, and even as they were physically forcing him to the ground and handcuffing him, he continued screaming threats. "I'll kill you. I'll kill everyone in this courtroom. You're all dead. You think you can do this to me? I'll shoot all of you just like I shot that bitch. She deserved it, and you deserve it too." Alicia's family reacted with visible horror and rage. Carlos had to be physically restrained by other family members as he attempted to reach Devon. Elena was sobbing, traumatized by hearing Devon refer to their murdered daughter as "that bitch," and by his continuing threats of violence. Gabriela and Miguel were crying, further traumatized by the violent outburst. Judge Coleman, showing remarkable composure despite being directly threatened with murder, immediately ordered Devon removed from the courtroom. As bailiffs carried him out still struggling, still screaming threats, she called a recess to allow everyone to compose themselves and to determine how to proceed. After a 30-minute recess, during which additional security was brought into the courtroom and Devon was placed in a holding cell, Judge Coleman reconvened proceedings. Devon was not brought back to the courtroom. The judge determined that his threatening behavior made it unsafe to have him present for sentencing. Judge Coleman addressed what had occurred with visible anger. The court has just witnessed Devin Carter make explicit death threats against a sitting judge in open court. Those threats, "I'll shoot you just like I shot her," demonstrate beyond any doubt that Devin Carter remains dangerous, that he continues to see violence as an appropriate response to perceived slights, and that he has not developed even a shred of genuine remorse for murdering Alicia Martinez. His outburst has eliminated any question about appropriate sentencing. The judge then proceeded with sentencing in Devin's absence, with his attorney present but Devin himself in a holding cell. Her remarks reflected both the legal requirements and her assessment of Devin's continuing danger. "Devin Carter, you murdered Alicia Martinez because you believed you owned her and had the right to take her life rather than accept her decision to end your relationship. The evidence showed extensive planning and premeditation. You stole a gun. You researched violence. You wrote about your intent to harm Alicia, and then you executed her on her family's doorstep while she tried to flee to safety." Judge Coleman's tone became more severe. "Throughout this trial, you have shown no genuine remorse. You have blamed Alicia for her own murder. You have acted dismissively during victim impact statements. And today, you have threatened to murder me in the same way you murdered her. Your behavior demonstrates that you remain a clear and present danger to society, particularly to women, and particularly to any person who has authority over you or who refuses to comply with your demands." The judge pronounced formal sentence. Devin Carter, for the first-degree murder of Alicia Martinez with special circumstances, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. You will spend the remainder of your life in prison with no possibility of release. Additionally, you will be charged separately with criminal threats against a judicial officer, for which you will face additional prosecution and sentencing. Judge Coleman concluded with words that captured the case's full dimensions. Alicia Martinez was 17 years old. She recognized that her relationship with you was dangerous, and she tried to leave safely. She did everything right, and you murdered her for exercising her fundamental right to autonomy and self-determination. Your complete lack of remorse, your continued blaming of your victim, and your threats against this court demonstrate that you are exactly the kind of offender for whom life without parole exists. You will die in prison, having spent your entire adult life incarcerated for murdering a young woman whose only crime was saying no to you. As Judge Coleman finished pronouncing sentence, Devin could be heard screaming from the holding cell, though his words were not clearly audible in the courtroom. The weight of life without parole, combined with the additional charges for threatening a judge, meant Devin Carter would never be free again. The aftermath of Devin Carter's conviction, sentencing, and courtroom threat created multiple ripples through the community and raised important discussions about teen dating violence and justice system responses. The additional charge of making criminal threats against a judicial officer was prosecuted separately and resulted in an additional 10-year sentence to run consecutively to his life sentence, largely symbolic given his existing life without parole, but important for establishing consequences for threatening judges. Devin began serving his life sentence without parole at California State Prison, Corcoran, in a maximum security unit. Prison records indicated he remained a difficult inmate who showed minimal remorse, continued to express anger about his sentence, and demonstrated the same narcissistic attitudes that had led to Alicia's murder. In a 1923 prison mental health evaluation, Devin was noted to have said, "I didn't get a fair trial. Everyone was against me because they felt sorry for Alicia's family. If people really knew what she was like, if they knew how she treated me, they would understand why I did what I did." This statement, continuing to blame Alicia and frame her murder as somehow justified, demonstrated that even after a year in prison, Devin had developed no genuine understanding of his crime or remorse for taking Alicia's life. The impact on the Martinez family remained profound. Elena and Carlos continued therapy to process the trauma of losing Alicia, with both reporting in 2023 that they struggled daily with grief and guilt. "We tried to protect her," Elena said in an interview. "We helped her make a safety plan. We thought breaking up at school would keep her safe. But Devin was determined to kill her, and our plan couldn't stop him." Every parent of a daughter in an abusive relationship lives with the fear that we do that trying to leave is when abusers are most dangerous. Gabriela and Miguel both required ongoing therapy for PTSD related to witnessing Alicia's murder and Devin's courtroom outburst. Both reported nightmares, anxiety, and difficulty trusting relationships. The family's experience became part of their advocacy work, speaking at schools and domestic violence prevention events about warning signs of abusive relationships and the importance of taking teen dating violence seriously. The Alicia Martinez Foundation was established by her family and friends, providing education about teen dating violence, supporting resources for young people trying to leave abusive relationships, and advocating for better training for schools and parents in recognizing warning signs of abuse. The foundation kept Alicia's memory alive while working to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. The case prompted Martin Luther King High School and Riverside Unified School District to implement enhanced teen dating violence prevention education, training for staff in recognizing warning signs, and clearer protocols for responding when students report concerning behavior by intimate partners. The school also created a memorial scholarship in Alicia's name, awarded annually to a student pursuing social work or counseling. The broader discussions the case raised about teen dating violence proved important for public awareness. Statistics showing that intimate partner violence often begins in teen relationships, that leaving is the most dangerous time for victims, and that possessive, controlling behavior often escalates to lethal violence became more widely understood. Alicia's case became an example used in dating violence prevention programs to illustrate the progression from control to murder, and the importance of recognizing red flags early. The question of how to better protect young people in abusive relationships generated extensive discussion. Advocates pushed for better education about healthy relationships starting in middle school, for more accessible resources for teens trying to leave abusive partners, and for better coordination between schools, families, and law enforcement when concerning behavior is reported. Devin's courtroom threat against Judge Coleman became one of the most dramatic examples in recent California legal history of how defendants can reveal their continuing danger through their own behavior. Legal analysts noted that Devin's threat, coming in the moment he should have been expressing remorse, provided the clearest possible evidence that life without parole was appropriate. The threat also prompted reviews of courtroom security protocols for volatile defendants, and discussions about whether defendants with documented histories of violence should be shackled during sentencing. Judge Coleman, who had presided over criminal cases for 18 years, later described the Devin Carter case as the most disturbing she had encountered. "I've sentenced violent offenders for decades," she said in a 2023 interview, "but I've never witnessed such complete absence of remorse combined with such explicit expression of continued violent intent. When Devin threatened to shoot me, just like I shot her, he was telling us that he had learned nothing, that he felt no remorse, that he remained dangerous. It confirmed that life without parole was not just legally required, but morally necessary." As of 2024, Devin Carter remained incarcerated at age 20, having served 2 years of a life sentence without a possibility of parole. He would die in prison, having spent his entire adult life behind bars for murdering his girlfriend when she tried to leave his abuse. Alicia Martinez had been dead for 2 years, her potential unrealized, her family permanently scarred, her community robbed of a young woman who had wanted to dedicate her life to helping others. The tragedy of the Carter case stood as a stark reminder of the deadly danger of intimate partner violence, particularly the risk faced by victims who try to leave abusive relationships. Alicia had recognized the abuse, had developed a safety plan, had broken up in what should have been a safe environment, and had died anyway, because Devin believed his right to possess her outweighed her right to life and autonomy. The courtroom where Devin had threatened Judge Coleman while showing no remorse for Alicia's murder continued to handle criminal cases, though the incident remained legendary among courthouse personnel as one of the most shocking outbursts they had witnessed. Devin's threat, coming immediately after victim impact statements describing the devastation his violence had caused, demonstrated a level of narcissism and lack of empathy that shocked even experienced justice system professionals. The case ultimately served as testament to the permanent consequences of intimate partner violence, to the particular vulnerability of young people in abusive relationships, who may not recognize warning signs or may not have resources to leave safely, and to the deadly belief system that views intimate partners as possessions, rather than autonomous individuals with the right to make their own choices about relationships. Alicia Martinez's memory lived on through her family's advocacy, through the foundation bearing her name, and through the countless young people who learned about healthy relationships and warning signs of abuse through programs developed in her honor. Her death, while tragic and preventable, prompted changes that would potentially save other lives and would ensure that her brief time on Earth had lasting impact. Devin Carter's legacy was one of destruction of Alicia's life, of his own future, of the Martinez family's wholeness, and ultimately of any claim to redemption through his courtroom threat that demonstrated his continuing belief that violence was an appropriate response to perceived slights. His life sentence meant he would age from teenager to middle age to eventual old age entirely within prison walls. Consequences for the murder he committed at 18, and for the threats he made that demonstrated he had learned nothing and remained dangerous. the throat-slashing gesture that another defendant made, the smirks during victim testimony, the complete absence of appropriate remorse. These behaviors that characterized Devon throughout proceedings ensured that when Judge Coleman imposed the harshest possible sentence, everyone present understood it was not just legally required, but morally justified. Devon had shown who he was through his own words and actions, and that person was someone who could never safely be released. The Valentine's Day timing of Alicia's murder added cruel irony to an already devastating tragedy. A day meant to celebrate love had become the date of her execution by someone who claimed to love her, but who actually viewed her as property to be controlled or destroyed. For the Martinez family, Valentine's Day would forever be marked by grief rather than celebration, by memories of finding Alicia bleeding on their doorstep rather than by romantic gestures. As California continued wrestling with questions about appropriate punishment for young offenders, about rehabilitation versus permanent incarceration, the Devon Carter case stood as an example of an offender whose own behavior eliminated any argument for leniency. His premeditation, his execution of his victim, his continued blaming of her, and his threat to commit the same violence against the judge who sentenced him all combined to create an undeniable case for life without parole. The case remained a touchstone in discussions about teen dating violence, about recognizing and responding to controlling behavior before it escalates to lethality, and about ensuring that young people understand that leaving an abusive relationship is both their right and sometimes a dangerous necessity requiring planning and support. Alicia had understood this and had tried to leave safely. The tragedy was that even with planning and awareness, she hadn't been safe from Devon's determination to ensure that if he couldn't have her, no one would.